So tariffs are a tax, essentially. It's a tax. Now the question is who pays that tax? Like we're gonna tariff everybody and drill baby drill, right? And you've
So
taken deficits on shipping and the difference between trade on countries and things like that. Like, oh wait, so you're giving money to some country that we've for some reason we're helping, we don't know why. The whole issue that was going on with people coming into the US illegally through the southern border. To come in, they're handing them EBT cards with cash on them. So they'll raise prices in their country to help out with the import taxes coming to our country, but a portion of it's going to come to us and it's going to hurt our pocketbooks. It's essentially a tax.
bro, pot is good.
All the time?
And all the time.
Pot is good.
My man, James, how have you been, bro? Thank you so much for coming back with us.
I'm good. Yeah, no, it's good to be back on here.
Yeah, man, good to see you. You look happy. You look healthy. Things going good in your world.
All's good. All's
Yeah.
good, man. New baby on the way, and I know you guys have a new one too. Congratulations.
Yes. Yeah, and you got a little princess, right?
Yeah, another little girl coming. So
Yeah.
we're excited about that, which is it's good, man. After this one comes, she's due in late March, and it'll be three daughters. So three
Same here.
girls running around.
We are the princess tandem. Like we're the princess creating tandem, and
Yeah,
we're all over it. I feel like you trying to beat me. I'm gonna let you win. If you want to
yeah.
go four, you can go four.
Oh my gosh, don't put that on me. No, no, it's good. We need more girls in the world, right?
That's a fact. That is a fact. That is a good way to look at it. We are blessing the world with the beautiful energy of women,
Absolutely.
God-fearing,
Absolutely.
loving women from good families. That's always good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell the wife we said, congrats and all that. Can't wait for her to get here.
Yeah.
I know she's ready. Women are always ready. It's like at a certain point, it goes from like a beautiful thing to an agonizing headache. Get it over with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she's carrying all that extra weight, it's time to get it out. She wants
Yeah.
to he just doesn't want her back hurt anymore, But
Yeah.
all the good stuff comes with it too, I mean, obviously you have the first few weeks with a newborn, that's tough, but
Mm.
after that, then you just it's like another little human you get to watch grow and learn their mannerisms and their
So true.
personality, and that's always fun.
So true. Yeah, we're in that first couple of weeks right now. Ours is just a week and a couple of days, and yeah, right now it's what it is in the beginning. You know what I mean? It's what you expect. It's them
Yeah.
acclimating to the new world. They have a few things that they do, and you try to prop them up in front of the camera to get as many cute pictures as you can. The
Hmm.
whole room explodes every time they smile or open their eyes because it's so magical. And
Yeah.
you're just trying to, make sure that they are good to get to the next phase. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's good when you have kids at different levels. We have our oldest is 5, and she's pretty much does everything on her own now. But our second is just turned 2, so she's like just barely talking,
Oh
and
wow.
every day she's saying new words, which is amazing. And then we'll have another little one where we're in that baby stage again,
Yeah.
trying to like keep the kids quiet while she's taking a nap, that type of stuff. But no, it's good.
Yeah. That's lovely, man. Well, again, glad to have you back on. If I forgot which episode you were on previously, but y'all, if you have not heard my man James's story, we had an incredible, a heartwarming, heart touching, gut wrenching at sometimes conversation about his story, his life, where he's from, how he came up, how he got to the place that he is right now to be the investment shark that he has become to be today, and father of 3 beautiful princesses and king to a queen. So, um,
Yeah.
if you guys have a moment, go back. I should have brought it up. I'm gonna pull it up before we get off so people know exactly which episode you were on in the beginning, because that story needs to be well heard, since it's documented. But I contacted you because President Trump says he has like a favorite word, and that word is tariff. He loves the word tariff, and he's used the word so many times, and we've heard it so much in the news and in everywhere else. Is like, I don't really believe we all truly understand what the word means, what the impact of a tariff truly is. I just found out that it's originally an Arabic word. Had no clue. Like a whole different enunciation, and people would use it. It was used like a noun and a verb. So we use it like a tariff, but they would use it like I'm going to tariff you.
Mm-hmm.
I never knew that. So that had me thinking like, okay, yeah, we got all the talk about, the billionaires and all of that and how it influences, the top, right? The top of the top. But for us everyday people, we still don't understand what this is going to mean, how to prepare for this, how to project what tariffs are going to do, whether it's 200% of tariffs towards John Deere or 50% tariffs towards Mexico. Like, how do we even figure all that out? So anyway, all that brought me to, what the stock market is usually a good indicator of things. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? It really like kind of shows us what our financial institutions and our overall economy, how healthy it is. So I thought of you.
Right on.
And I'm like, you know what? Maybe he can shed some light for us into this area that will kind of illuminate not only, what a tariff is, if you want to go into that, maybe why he might feel the need for these tariffs, but the biggest part is how is this going to affect the stock market, which will in turn show us how it might affect us in our, on the ground level.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no. Thanks for bringing me in. It's good to be back here. And yeah, definitely check out that other episode. I can't remember which one it was either. I
I'm gonna
know
get
there was one real early on, and then we did one, the second one, which was maybe a month or so after that. I can't
yeah,
remember, 2 months or so.
yeah,
Um,
about how to get started investing.
yeah, that's
Like
right. Yeah.
step one. Yeah, that was a good one too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, no, hey, thanks for bringing me on. I did have a write up for it. I can always send you the link. You can put it in the description of the podcast if you'd like.
Okay.
People could read it. It's kind of just my thoughts on really where we will go economically, and most importantly, where markets potentially could go because of some of these changes that he's making.
Yeah.
And obviously, it's like in his speech, he's like, "We're gonna tariff everybody and drill, baby, drill," right? So,
Yeah.
and bringing in a lot of people, Department of Government Efficiency, which is a great name, by the way. And
Right.
love the guy or hate the guy, but I was thinking about this morning,
Yeah.
and man, he's not even been in there for a month yet, and he's
Right.
done quite a bit of work.
Right.
Is it disruptive? Yes. Is some of it good? I don't know. Is it bad? I don't know either.
Hmm.
Um, it's hard to really tell because we have such a in our government institution is so entwined with normal day to day life.
Yeah.
If you think about it, government spending, which is a big part of our GDP and economy, is our government's 25% of our GDP,
Hmm.
right? So when he talks about tariffs from the past, he's talking about a time where government was sub 5% of our GDP.
Right. Right. There you go.
Way less than any portion of our GDP. So than we are now. So tariffs. If we go back to his first term, that was a big talking point for him too, right? Coming into 2018, there was talk about tariffs. He added some, and then really got hardcore into it in 2019, and they had some effect on the market. Not really until 2019, as they start really working themselves into the economy. the market was down over that time roughly 14% in 2019. But people forget, 2019 economically was actually not a good time. People talk. I know if anyone's ever paid attention to the news in the recent years, you hear about a lot about the yield curve inversion. Right? And that's a sign that we're going into a recession, right? And usually it's not the yield curve inversion that causes us to go into recession. It's when that actually reinverts. Is after that is when we go into a recession.
Okay, hold on.
And
What is that? Yield curve inversion. What is that?
yeah, so the yield curve, so the bond market, which is basically all of the debt that we have, and that's all the treasury debt that we have
Hmm.
as a country. So what happens is the Treasury Department issues debt, right? And that debt goes out into the economy as a bond. So investors can invest in that. That's other countries can invest in it. Our own institutions invest in it. We as individuals invest in it. There's big funds out there that purchase a lot of it too.
Okay.
And essentially, what that's doing is they're saying, hey, look, we need money. I'm going to take out. It's just like if we went to the bank and say, hey, look, I want to buy this house. Well, you're going to take out a loan.
Right.
What happens with that money when you take a loan out at the bank? It gets sold to different institutions, usually like Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, right? Which are the housing authority type of corporations, right?
Yeah.
And they purchase that debt, hold it on their books. Your lender who you got the loan through just services it. So they're just basically taking your payments every month and sending the money where it needs to go, right? Taking their
Mhm.
little cut. So our government has the similar situation where if they need money, they're going to issue a debt, which is a bond, and that bond's going to be purchased by people around. That's how they're going to get that cash to continue funding everything.
Hmm.
And the reason why these tariffs have really come to forefront is number one. I mean, our current global debt, or sorry, debt in the U.S. not global, but debt in the U.S. is extremely high. I don't exactly know the number right now, but I'm pretty sure it's close to $30 trillion,
Right. Right. It's always
which
high.
is the high. Yeah, which is the highest it's been ever. And I think it's number one is it's a problem because there's many ways for us to pay back our debt. One of them is, hey, get to a balanced budget and start paying it down. The other way is, hey, we're just going to pay it back with inflated dollars. So it's like,
Hmm.
we'll go back to the home uh, example. When you purchase a home and you look at that, they give you the final payment. If they give you the amortization schedule essentially,
Yeah.
where it's like, okay, you're paying this much interest. This is how much you're paying now. When you're all said and done, this $400,000-500,000 home is going to cost you $1 million or whatever that number is. Maybe it's 750, but we'll go with a million just to make it easier.
Okay.
The reality is yeah, I mean, in today's dollars, $1 million is a lot of money, but in 30 years in the future, $1 million is not going to buy you nearly what $1 million would buy you today. So, for
Mhm.
instance, if you had $1 million in your bank account and you wanted to go buy a Ferrari, you're going to pay 350 grand or so for that Ferrari. Well, in 30 years, you might actually be paying $1 million for a Ferrari. See what I'm saying? So its purchasing power essentially changes over 30 years with inflation. So it's the same concept when you're paying your house off. Is like I'm paying $1 million for this property, but I'm paying it back with inflated dollars over time. So you're really not, the purchasing power is different, in 30 years than it is now today. So you're actually really not paying much more to it. That's why some people say, oh, should I pay my house off now before I retire, or should I just pay it off after I retire? And there's a big debate about that, and everyone's different. But essentially, you're paying it back with inflated dollars over time. So it's the
Got
same
it. Makes
concept
sense.
with our debt, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
As purchasing power goes down with those dollars, you basically have more of those dollars to spend to pay it down with in the future. So you're taking off debt right now, or they're taking on debt right now that they can pay it back with more dollars in the future, essentially. And it
Huh.
actually is a way to pay down that debt over time. The problem is we're taking on more debt than we can handle. I mean, especially if interest rates go up, and interest rates will go up with inflation. So it's kind of this double-edged sword. It's like inflation goes higher and interest rates go higher to kind of combat that. That's what our Federal
Yeah.
Reserve is meant there to do.
Yeah.
So this concept of paying it back with inflated dollars only works if keeping like a good pace of debt. Everyone knows you can't just take out tons of debt and make a bunch of money off of it, right? Like you're not going to get rich with a ton of debt. Now, obviously, leveraging certain things is going to make you money, right? So there's some people who buy a stock and then they'll borrow against it to buy more, right? And
Huh.
that could make you more money. But you want to be prudent in that. You don't want to just go over leveraged into something because you can get yourself into some high risk.
That
That's
makes
essentially what we've done as a country is we've over leveraged ourselves and got ourselves into a situation where it's higher risk.
huh.
Because as interest rates go up, we owe more money on that debt. The country does. So, say if currently right now, just if we're at $30 trillion in debt and our interest rates were 10% on those, they'd be paying $3 trillion a year just for interest on those loans, right?
Wow.
And that's just interest payments to make sure that that money is not going to default.
Yeah.
And usually, treasury debt, which is debt issued by our government, is thought of to be like the least risky investment option. Now, it's actually less risky than cash. People don't
Huh.
understand that because the concept is if you have $100,000 in the bank and you leave it there for 30 years, that hundred same it's the same concept of inflation, right? It's like that $100,000 in 30 years is not going to buy you what $100,000 bought today, right? So you don't see your money fluctuate. Still says 100,000, and you might be getting a little bit of interest on it if you're just
Right.
in a savings account. Not talking about
Right.
money market or anything with higher
Yeah.
rates, but if you're in a savings account, you hold it in there for 30 years, even 5 years, right? You're making less money on it. Your purchasing power goes down by whatever inflation is every single year. So if it's
Yeah.
2, 3, 4, 5%, that's how much your purchasing power goes down. So it still says 100 grand, but you
Yeah.
just can buy less and less with it. So
Yeah.
with treasuries, it's thought of as, the government, they're backed by the full faith and credit of the US government, right? So for us as investors, we see that as a safe haven, right? It's better than keeping it in cash because there's no, you're at least you're keeping up with inflation and hopefully a little bit more. Well, the problem is now you have this exorbitant amount of debt that the government keeps spending. So they're always hitting these budget deficits, right? And they always have to keep raising the budget, raising the budget, raising the budget, and they have problems doing that, sometimes getting some of that stuff passed. Well, really what we've been doing over the years is just saying, okay, let's turn a blind eye and keep raising the budget, keep raising the budget. And don't worry, I'm getting into tariffs here, but I'm kind of laying down the background of
Yeah.
like
No, I get
why.
it. And now, real quick, before you keep going, when you're saying we kept raising the budget, we kept raising the budget, it sounds like you're not saying this is a single administration's issue. It sounds like this is over time.
Oh yeah, this is you're
This
talking,
is this is nonpartisan. This is Democrats did it, Republicans did it. This is just the way of the United States and how they operate in this world on this planet.
Yeah, I mean, so since Bill Clinton, essentially, like Bill Clinton, we had one of the best fiscal policies, according to history, right, at the time.
Okay.
And let's just keep Clinton forward, right?
Okay.
We've continued to just raise our budget, and a lot of that goes to,
War.
well, a lot of it did go to, yeah, you're right. It went to war, right? I mean, that was a big problem. We spent 20 years in the Middle East, right?
Uh,
And that was very expensive. But a lot of it too, we started creating a lot of these like social justice type of, things that we wanted as a country to help people out within our own country, but also outside of the country.
huh.
And so we've just continuously raised the budget, and we've taken deficits on shipping and the difference between trade on countries and things like that. And so
And give
it's
me an example of maybe like a domestic and an international social justice um add-on that
it,
we did that the government ended up taking on the debt for that particular thing.
well, that's the thing is it's reality is it's our tax dollars. It's not really the government creates it. These laws get passed. But for instance, like one area we could think of would probably be farming. I mean, there's more, but let's think about farming, for instance.
Okay.
There's a lot of subsidies that are given to farmers, right? Just because farming's hard. I mean, They
Mm.
aren't necessarily making a lot of money off of it. So what the government does is they'll set ceilings and floors on prices. Like you can't sell it for, we're not going to, you can't sell it for less than this, can't sell it for more than that. And if there's like a problem, say for instance, I mean, obviously eggs are a big deal right now, right? Everyone's like, there's apparently everyone's hoarding eggs. I just read that this morning, right? And they're expensive. I understand it.
You know, all these
Uh,
luxurious chickens running around.
right. Yeah. And well, I think what it really comes down to is the USDA was going around telling people to kill their chickens because they had bird flu. And
Hmm.
apparently there's reports that some people actually didn't have bird flu. They killed their chickens, and so there's a shortage, right? And a shortage gets people. Remember COVID? Everyone wanted toilet paper. It's kind of the
Yes.
same situation
Yes.
with
Yes.
eggs right now. And eggs are kind of expensive at the moment, and it seems that they might actually keep going up in price. So people are hoarding eggs, which is funny because it's a perishable. How long are you going to be able to keep that? But just let's just say like eggs, right? So the government's going to say, hey, look, we're going to put a ceiling on these, and they're like, hey, okay, well we'll put a ceiling on them, but we actually instead of $7 for 18 eggs, we need to sell these for 10 just to break even. So the
Mm.
government's saying, okay, well we're going to give you $3 per whatever you sell on. It could be like a tax credit, or it could be just it could be something that they're helping them kind of meet the middle on it. So that's one way, right?
Yeah.
There's plenty of things out there like I mean during COVID, during the whole issue that was going on with people coming into the U.S. Illegally through the southern border,
Yeah.
which I don't want to debate whether that's right or wrong. It's not the point, but the point here is when they do come in, they're handing them EBT cards with cash on them, and that money allows them to go get food, which rightfully so. I mean, if they're coming here, we should be able to help them with food at least, right? But that's a budget
Not everybody
issue.
thinks that, but I would agree. But
True,
not everybody. Some people are like, let them starve. That'll make them go back home faster. But
right? We don't want to see starving in the street. It's going to be
right, right.
it'll be even worse for us, right? But whether they should be here or not is really that's obviously up for everyone's debate. I don't debate that, but the point is
Yeah.
that's money coming out of our federal budget, right? For to help people come in and give them resources and food. So there's just been a ton of them, right? Internationally, we do a lot of stuff. Like I guess one of the big ones that came out recently was the USAID,
Mm.
USAID division. I'd never heard of it before until this
Yeah.
whole situation went down.
Right.
But think of it from them, like they have been told where they're supposed to go and where they're supposed to help, and they as a organization has decided to branch out from there. And the government's in their mind, they're saying, hey, like if this is not in our interest, if this is not helping us, why are we doing these things? And that's one of the reasons why they kind of shut it down.
Mm.
But they were just basically spending money, to large tunes, and that was being paid for by us and our tax money. So that was coming out of the federal budget. And they like to they what they do is the government does is they'll have these big bills and they'll pass these big bills and they'll throw little things in there that you just don't notice,
Yep.
and everyone knows that. It's just
Yeah.
weird random little things. They give them like a weird title, and then you read through it and you're like, oh wait, so you're giving money to some country that we've for some reason we're helping, we don't know why. But so that's another just kind of example of that. But our
Yeah.
budget, I mean, regardless of what it was, our budget's just kind of gone, haywire to the upside. There's been, in people's defense or in some of our elected officials' defenses, they have come to, the congressional floor and the Senate and has said, hey, some of this stuff is just not right. I mean, look at Social Security, look at what we're doing over here, look at this. Like, this is not sustainable. We really need to figure this out. And Trump has come in, or the current administration as a whole has come in and said, "Hey, they're right. Let's actually do something about this." And one of the ways that they want to do something about this is tariffs, right? They also want to help U.S. citizens by lowering taxes,
Right.
right? So tariffs are a tax, essentially. It's a tax. Now the question is, who pays that tax?
Right.
Early on in his first term, the majority of that tax was passable on to the consumer, which would be us. Some of it is passed on to the importer or the person who's trying to import into our country, right? and some of it has been passed on to other people of that country. So they'll raise prices in their country to help out with the import taxes coming to our country, but a portion of it's going to come to us and it's going to hurt our pocketbooks because it's essentially a tax. Now the question is whether or not that company or the importer of that product, whatever it is, has the ability to, or it just has any pricing power on that product. How can they price it? Right. So we've gone through,
Mm.
I mean, we all know a huge inflation move to the upside over the past 3 or 4 years, basically since 2020. And having pricing power as a company, importer, whatever the case is important if they can raise prices to deal with some of these tariffs or taxes. I'm not certain that they actually have the ability to do that. I don't know what the average American is dealing with in terms of the cost of groceries. I mean, I know what I am, and I know they're expensive. So I'd assume that everyone else feels the same way, right?
Right.
So if you had tariffs on products, and they have the ability, some of that, to be pushed onto the consumer, then it's just another way to raise prices. Will the consumer be able to afford those prices? I don't know. Will they? You'd have to answer that question for you and your family. But generally, my, I from my standpoint, is I would believe that they probably don't. Pretty much everyone's taxed at the moment. So will they be able to raise prices? Not as much as they think, I think. So I think the other country is going to have to deal with that. So what's been really going on with shipping and just trade between countries, especially us and a lot of countries,
Uh-huh.
is we have been they haven't been accepting as much of our product as we have been accepting theirs. So there's an imbalance there. And what the current administration's trying to do is, number one, since we are bringing in a lot more goods and services, saying, hey, we're going to put a tariff on you to bring it in. And it's a multi-step process. So his goal is not to really just come out and say, okay, our citizens are going to pay more for this.
Yeah.
He's thinking, look, we're going to put a bigger tariff on you, so you're going to be able to bring in basically less goods. We want more people to open businesses here in the U.S. We
Mm.
want to lower taxes for the citizen, for average citizen,
Yeah.
and we also want to get rid of like our bloated government. And he thinks that these will balance each other out, and they're not going to balance each other out right away, but over time, his theory, or at least his cabinet or whoever's helping him with this, believes that this is the case. So, for instance, a few things they floated out. Obviously, everyone knows the Department of Government Efficiency, right? So they're trying to look for fraud and corruption, bloat in the government. What do we need to spend money on? What do we not need to spend money on? And that's going to help pay down some of this debt that we have, or at the very least, slow down how much debt we're taking out.
Yeah.
Tariffs, a tariff on goods is going to bring in more revenue for the U.S. to pay down some of this debt, or again, not take on as much, essentially, in the future. And then as well too, because they're taking on more tariffs, instead of taxing more on us, right? Start lowering taxes in a way that's beneficial for us. So we know that in his first term, he set the current tax code, which is called the TCJA, right? And he wants to extend that, but he also wants to bring in a few more cuts in that respect. So obviously, no tax on tips, right, is a big one. No tax on overtime pay, which is a big one.
Yeah.
I think the tips is actually probably a big one more for people who do work
Yeah.
in jobs where they take tips,
Yeah.
because number one, the data suggests that only 50% or something like that of tips are actually uh, um, put on people's tax returns. So they're only claiming 50% of their taxes, or
Right.
on their taxes.
Yeah.
If there's no tax on that, then there's no reason to not claim it. And you and I both know, purchasing a home or large items, the home is the biggest one. Purchasing a home,
Yeah. They want to
if you
see
have,
income.
want to see income. right?
Yeah,
So you have now 50% more money in tips on there. You might actually have a better chance of, purchasing a property. Maybe not in San Francisco, LA, New York, you know what
right.
I mean? On
Miami,
the
right.
Yeah, yeah, but maybe, if you live in the Midwest or
Yeah,
something, you may have a better opportunity there,
that's
just
true.
by, having the ability to claim more. So
Okay,
I
hold
think
on, hold
that's a
on, real quick.
wonderful idea.
Let's put the bookmark right there on taxing tips because I do want to come back there. Um, I wanted to go backwards just for a second because there were some areas that I just want to make sure that everyone that's listening is very clear on because a lot of things kind of get muddied in the media. So let's first start with, and this is going somewhere, but let's first start with in President Trump's first um, term,
Hmm.
did he inherit? Do you recall if he inherited a good or bad economy?
Yeah, so essentially it was not great.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I mean, we were heading to recession sometime 2020 2019.
Okay.
Things weren't phenomenal. They also weren't terrible either because some of these things take time to really kind of work themselves into the economy. You could be talking 18 to 24
2019.
months.
But
That was 20.
2019 is on the back end of his term. He came in 2016, right?
Yeah, so that was kind of on the back end. So 2016, I don't know if people remember, but right around that 2015-16 timeframe, oil prices crashed,
Hmm.
or oil stocks crashed
Hmm.
significantly, right? There was like a lot of like kind of turmoil within the equities markets. They were starting to raise interest rates again. So things were getting kind of tough within that time frame.
Okay.
And he was trying to work ourselves out of that through his first term. Um, and the market just went bonkers to the upside when he came in office. And, he was trying to make some changes there. But coming into 2019, it was pretty clear that, I mean, it was like a slow train wreck kind of, as we were watching it, it's like watching a train wreck happen in slow motion, as people say.
Yeah.
So there was some changes that he made. A lot of he came in with tariffs, right? And that was probably the start of the inflationary experience that we were starting to witness. It also didn't help that when 2020 happened, the government just started taking on a lot of debt and giving out a bunch of money. So that was
Yes.
another reason why inflation started to take off. So we actually really didn't get to see the effects of the initial tariffs in the
Okay.
way that we would expect just
Okay.
because of COVID.
Okay. So that means it sounds like he was more correct than President Obama because President Obama was saying that the the economy had been trending better since when he inherited it from Bush, right? Yeah, from Bush prior.
So yeah, all
But
right.
you're
So
saying it was more of a it was heading down. So I'm trying to make sure like as the baton gets handed over, we understand kind of where things are because then that kind of helps us understand why that next administration has specific desires and initiatives around the economy based off of the condition that they're receiving that
yeah,
baton in. You see what I mean?
Uh, yeah, okay, so let's back up a little bit. In Obama's two terms, well, first of all, we had 2008 crisis, right?
Yeah.
We come out of 2008 and we're in shambles. Like I remember I was working at Morgan Stanley and we would just hear so many different types of, and this is 2010. So this is after the market already bottomed in 2009. We would hear like a lot of crazy stuff happening. People
Right.
didn't believe that we were coming out of the great financial recession in 2010. People like still held on to that into 2011, and then even 2013 markets up 35% or something like that, and people still think we're in a recession, right?
Okay.
So if we go back a little bit, 2008, what happened in 2008? We really just put a band-aid on it, right? We did a few items like we lowered interest rates basically to zero. So we did a lot of quantitative easing, which basically gave the federal government and individuals the ability to go out and buy houses, and all this stuff because we basically trended interest rates lower.
Hmm.
With quantitative easing, what happens is the federal or the Federal Reserve comes in and they start buying some of those bonds that we have, so those treasury debts that I was talking about earlier. They go and buy a whole bunch of them all along the yield curve. That forces interest rates lower because it's an inversely correlated type of a purchase. So if there's a lot of bonds on the market, right, that are out there freely for people to buy, they want them to buy so they have higher rates. But if you're
Huh.
going to buy a whole bunch of them, there's not that many out there, right? Then the rates are on those are actually going to drop lower. And
Gotcha.
prices is so it's also prices too. So as rates go higher, prices go lower, and as rates go lower, prices go higher. So it's inversely correlated. But the point of it is as we came out of that, they went on this quantitative easing path, which basically just was flooding money into the economy. And it's kind of a false way to show that we're doing better, if that makes sense. So
Hmm.
it's not necessarily that the economy was terrible, but we were on this path where it's not a real show of how things are working because
Yeah.
now you just have cheap money, it's out there freely, and we just continually overinflating the our government deficit. So it's all culminating into now. I mean, even through Trump's term, he really didn't take much to take down the deficit, right, that we had. And again, what we're at, you can go to the U.S. debt clock. I think it's usdebtclock.org or something, and you can see where we are. Usdebtclock.org. I'm going to type it in and just read it off for you. A national debt clock, usdebtclock.org. So we're at $36 trillion in national debt. That's $323,000 per taxpayer that we have of debt. We have federal tax revenue of 5 trillion, which so we're $20 trillion difference there. So we're nowhere near a balanced budget, but obviously, like I said before, I mean it's possible that we can start paying this down. It just may take us a decade or two. So the point of it is economically we are doing well because there's a lot of free money moving around there without anyone to say, hey, like this is not right, we need to do this a little slower.
Yeah.
So in his second term he's saying, hey, look, like how are we going to make these big changes within government? In his first term he wasn't a politician, he didn't know what to do, he didn't really understand how things worked from the federal government standpoint. In this term he's a lot more in tune with that. So he's, in the last 3 weeks, he's done, a year's worth of work essentially. So we're hoping that, he can start making some of these big changes, and some of these big changes are going to happen with tariffs. At least he hopes, and I have a hope for that too. I'm skeptical that they'll actually work the way he thinks because I think there's going to be a lot of roadblocks.
Yeah.
But a tariff comes in and it's going to affect us individually in some way. I don't know exactly how bad it will be, but we will see probably price increases until companies start coming here to produce and start coming here to start making products and goods again, because he's really trying to reshore things. But coming back from Obama into as Trump got elected, 2015-16 wasn't a great time,
Hmm.
right? Coming out of that, we just had continued inflation of our deficit.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, a good economy versus a great economy versus a bad economy during that time frame is actually kind of difficult to say what was good or bad, because now we're just looking back 20 years and we're saying, or close to 20 years now, and we're saying, wow, that wasn't the greatest thing to keep quantitative easing going, because now we have a bigger problem than we did in 2008, you know?
Got it. Okay. And so, okay. So then the next question was, you said that when it comes to tariffs, um, the government is kind of split three ways as far as like who takes on, the burden of it. It's the consumers on one end, the sellers on the other end, and also the government that's kind of in between, right?
Yeah. So
What dictates that? Like, what dictates those numbers and what percentages of those parties take on, what amounts of those tariffs?
yeah, so that's not, there's no like real formula for that. except for what can they change in their pricing power. So if they can price it into the market for consumers, they will. Absolutely. If they could do it 100%, they will. Say, for instance, iPhones, right? Let's take iPhones, for instance,
Yeah.
right? Say they're coming from China and all of a sudden there's a 25% tariff on iPhones. We already know iPhones are expensive. Say they're $1,000, right? And we know they're more than that, but let's just say an iPhone is $1,000
Right. Right.
and there's a 25% tariff. If Apple can charge $1,250 for an iPhone, they're absolutely going to try it,
Right.
right? They're not going to take on the burden of themselves. Hey, we're importing our goods from China there, and the Foxconn or whoever is making their iPhones now in China
Yeah.
is not going to take on much of that burden either,
Yeah.
right? Unless they have to. So if us as humans are saying, hey, look, like we're taxed out. I mean, there's people already right now. It's like they're saying, hey, look, I'm not even going to up. There's people who upgrade every year. Like, look, I'm not going to upgrade every year. I'm going to upgrade every 3 years now. So now if they still want to create revenue, Apple, for instance, they want to create revenue. They're not going to be, if you at $1,250, people are saying, hey, look, I'm going to wait 3 years. Maybe they say, okay, maybe we'll put 1,050. The Foxconn's going to have to take $50 an iPhone, and we're going to have to take 100 or 200, whatever the case is, right?
Mm.
150 hit, right? And there's always profit in there, so they have some wiggle room to figure this out. So it's like, what can the market bear is
Okay,
really
but
the
hold on.
question.
Then in that situation, let's just say the 25%, the 250. Let's say Apple says we'll take on 150, and let's say Foxconn, then that's the manufacturer in China. They're taking on the other $100, right?
Hmm.
So then, how does that benefit the economy? How does that stimulate the government? As it sounds like that's what the effort is.
Well,
How does
so
it change the
yeah, so that 25% is going as a tax to the federal government. See what I mean? So
Oh,
say
gotcha. So they're taking the
yes,
250 per
yeah.
unit, and then now we're trying to figure out a way to get that money back.
In the
Okay.
simplest terms, the federal government's taking that 250 from them. They're
Yeah.
already paying
Okay.
it. The companies are going to pay it, and then the company itself
Right.
is going to try and figure out who do we pass this on to? Us, the consumer, the company importing it, right? Or we're importing it, but Foxconn is shipping it. So
Right.
are they going to be able to like cut costs in manufacturing? You right? Are they going to be able to cut costs in something else to kind of balance that out, or are they going to have to just try and push it all on the consumer? And I just don't think the consumer is really at a point where we can take on more of that tax. So maybe in 2017, or sorry, 2017 and 18, when those tariffs first came in, we could take on more of that burden
Yeah.
as consumers, but I don't think we can take on much more of it at this point. So I think either the company's going to have to pay for it, somebody else is paying for it than the consumer if they want to sell product,
But I think you
right?
bring up a great product because iPhone is almost like can't live without
Yeah.
kind of product, or just smartphones in general that are mainly made somewhere else. So it kind of turns into, with certain items, being a benefit because they are just going to figure it out. You know what I mean? Like the exporting company is like, that's our biggest buyer. Like, we're gonna still make sure this works. So if I gotta eat $100, I'm gonna eat $100, right? If I gotta
Well,
eat 250, it's still, as long as it benefits my book still, because I'm pretty sure that at the amount that they actually spend on parts and labor, to actually create the device, the
yeah.
amount that we're buying it at, there's so much markup in it already that I'm pretty sure even with that tax, you're still not cutting them off at the knees as a business, right?
Well, I think with Apple too, we have to remember like they have their cloud business as well. You have the iCloud that you have to pay for every month, and as people get more and more phones, like people aren't deleting the pictures off their phone. When they get a new phone, they're just getting more storage, and then they take more, and then it just goes on their iCloud, and then they have to upgrade. So there's a whole another business there.
That's
that
true.
they have, involved.
Yeah.
But that's just a small example for Apple. Like the whole point of this is like major scheme of the current administration is not necessarily just the tariff. The tariff might have some pain for us as consumers in the beginning for a lot of products. But the biggest point here is he's saying, hey, look, if you come over and you manufacture here in the US, we're going to give you a better tax rate as well. So we're saying, hey, look, we're only going to tax you 15% opposed to what the current tax rate on corporations is, which I think is like maybe 20%. And I could be wrong on that number, but I'm pretty sure it's close to that. So he's saying instead of 20%, we're going to tax you guys 15% to make your goods here in the US, right? So it's really in his mind, he's saying, look, we're going to tax people trying to move stuff here that we could make here. Let's get these plants rolling again, get jobs created in more spaces than technology, or government. Because, one of the reasons we have a large government now is because, like, what are you going to do? You're going to work in technology, healthcare, financial services. I mean, a lot of these things that we do are service based. We're not really building cars as much as we used to here in the US. We're not using manufacturing. We're not making as much coal with some of the past, administration's goals of getting rid of that. Which, so in his mind, he's like saying, hey, let's get these machines turned back on. Let's start creating products here in the US again and get this ball rolling on the economy. Is he going to be able to do that all in 4 years? I'm highly doubtful.
But
But
my thing is, okay, so now that you tell me that bigger scheme, like kind of because I get the idea, but it doesn't sound realistic because it feels like once you add in the difference in the labor markets of what it costs to make something in China and what it costs to make something in America, and America, we want solid wages as we should. We have the property, land costs more. It's like we it costs more to do it here. And I'm saying, though it's great, let's do it here. But how is that going to? I don't see that 5% or 10% difference in what we tax you here as opposed to what we tax you in tariffs being a great enough driving force to do it in America, where now the labor might charge you 300% more than what you paid in China. You see what I mean?
yeah, yeah. So you have to remember too, as corporations, they get taxed really differently than us as individual taxpayers. So
Mm-hmm.
like think of like Amazon, right? I don't think Amazon's actually ever showed a profit, and the reason for that is they keep reinvesting in their business. So if any business has any type of profit, that's what they'll be taxed on. Majority of businesses continue to reinvest. So businesses can come over here, start producing over here, reinvest in those companies for years on end before they actually start paying taxes on it. But the biggest event that he's thinking of is reshoring a lot of that stuff that we offshored over the last 20 years. So is it realistic that he can make it happen in 4 years? I don't think so. Is it a good thing that he tries to do this and get the ball rolling in that sense? I believe so, because if we look at wages and how wages have increased over time, they've been pretty, I mean, they've grown slightly, but they've been pretty flat in growth, and so being able to have a bunch of college kids that pay $200,000 for their college degree, and we have a lot of smart people coming out of school here, uh, you know, should they be have to go and they develop a product here and have to make it in China, instead of having to create jobs here that can actually be utilized by people here? Will it increase wages? I think it will over time. It's just, is he going to be able to do it in 4 years? Probably not. So this might be a couple decades situation that we have going on. And is it going to be possible for us to benefit from that in those next decade or so? I don't know. You know, I think if we keep everything status quo, where we're kind of moving right now, we're just kind of putting ourselves in the same position all the time, moving forward. So it's like there's nothing new is going to change. And I think that's really what he's going for. Like, we need a change. We need to figure this out. Is there going to be some pain in the short term? Absolutely. Is it going to be beneficial in the long term? Most likely. right?
I'm just
Um,
now. I just need you to wrap my head around the reality. So let's go into a little bit of like not so much reality to try to find the reality, right? So let's just say in a perfect world, he's able to pull all of this off in 2 years. That's the impossible, right?
yeah,
Um, can't happen. No president could pull that off. Too many strings to pull. But let's just say he did it. Boom. Let's say uh, 50% of manufacturing that was offshore has now made it back to the States. Okay, so now let's just focus on those products. Those products left for a reason, right?
cheaper labor. Yeah, generally
Cheaper labor. And labor in most businesses is your largest um,
cost.
cost, right?
Yeah,
Okay, so it's here, right? We have higher wages, we have labor unions, we have um, higher property taxes, and I get that they don't all pay tax. I got that, but we also know that not every business that comes back is going to own the land that
yeah,
they have a business on. That land might be owned by someone else. They might be in another facility where there's multiple facilities. So there's still higher cost in doing business here. That's what I'm trying to find. Is he saying, and are you saying that all of those costs will still be sub the 25% tariff to where they would undergo all of that movement to then make it here? Is it that beneficial to that company?
yeah. I mean, that's a great question, and I don't really know the true answer to that. But from my perspective, depend because the thing is we bring in a lot of our goods from other countries, Mexico, Canada, China, Europe, right? All of our goods pretty much come from different countries at this point. So I think potentially, yeah, it's definitely could be beneficial in the long run, especially if you. So it's like think of it this way: every dollar that we make and we spend in the
Mm-hmm.
economy, a portion of that dollar is somebody else's income and somebody else's profit, right? So a company profits from it, but somebody else's income is part of it
Right,
too.
right.
So if we have a more robust labor market and more people are working, that problem should balance itself out over time. Now, are we going to bring in goods from other countries, whether that's raw earth metals for things like silicon chips and things like that? Yeah, probably, right? I mean, we don't have a huge resource of that here. We have a
So
ton
now,
of
so,
oil.
so now you have to ship that too.
Yeah, so well, that's something that needs to be shipped, right? But we have like, this morning he mentioned he wants to put a tariff on steel and
Yeah, I saw
aluminum,
that. And aluminum, yeah.
right? Right. But we have major steel and aluminum manufacturers here, right? Alcoa is a big one here. Nucor is a big one here. Alcoa is aluminum, right? And I mean, you just look at their stock prices, they're up, 10, 12% today. They might even be up more, but since the last time I looked at them. So they're saying, hey, look, like we have more competition now, right? So some of those are going to be beneficial for us because we're going to ship those out to different countries. We're going to use them here. If they're more expensive to bring them in from China, we can get a better product here for cheaper. Might as well do that, right? So I think in some ways it's going to be good. In some ways it's going to be difficult. And in some ways we're going to have to try and work out and figure that out as business owners and as investors. And that's what I mean. I don't think this is an overnight situation, but I do believe that if we continue on the path that we were on before, it's just going to make it harder and harder. I mean, essentially, we're talking about a country who only consumes and brings products from other places. So we just design them and bring them here because there's cheaper labor in Vietnam or China or wherever, right? Malaysia, Philippines, whatever the case is. Where now all of a sudden we're boosting their economies just because of our ideas, and instead we can do the opposite. And is it going to be more expensive for the companies at first? Yeah, but I think over time, especially with long-term businesses that are saying, hey, look, like we're planning on being in business for the next 40, 50 years, we can take a haircut for 7, 8 years before we're actually starting to see major profits. And it's just like technology companies. You see a technology company trading on the stock exchanges, and you're like, whoa, this is like a 200 price to earnings ratio on this company, which means like it's trading at 200 times its revenue, right? And why does it do that? Well, because it's very costly for them to get a product started. But once it gets started, it just starts coining money for them. And it's really, really beneficial, right? But that may take 7 years for that to really start working itself out. So I think a lot of it is it's going to be difficult to tell exactly how this is going to shake out. It'll be difficult to tell exactly how this is going to benefit us for a while. But having more jobs and manufacturing jobs here, and they're also getting rid of regulation too, right? They're going to try and work on keeping regulation not as strict, so it'll be easier to start businesses.
Well,
That's some of the biggest problems too, is our regulations are so high. So I mean, they're coming at it from a a 10-prong approach.
I mean,
Um,
I think the idea is phenomenal. I mean, I think that that's a benefit to the American people over time, like you're saying. Um, uh, it's just I'm having a hard time processing even over time. You know what I mean? Because as things change in America, they change in in the rest of the world as well. And so, like, I just looked up the average salary in China is $16,000 a year, or equates
yeah.
once and once you convert it, it equates to 16,000 US dollars. Average in
Hmm.
America is 66,000 US dollars.
Hmm.
$50,000 of difference for just one employee, and that's like probably more of a mid to lower level employee multiplied by a whole factory's worth. It's like, at what point does it get to, does it equal out to where it's like, yeah, we've been in this for 40 years and now it's really coming true. It's like, and on top of all of it, we know how government works. The moment Biden gets in, he's trying to undo things Trump did. The moment Trump gets in, he's trying to undo things Biden did. And it's like, you're in this constant tug of war back and forth. So who's to say that they even see this 30, 40, 50 year, bird's eye view that we're talking about, to even grasp that? Like, and then on top of that, we do a lot of focus on, removing people from the country. Again, we're not gonna argue whether that's right or wrong, but we have more of a focus in university towards tech, you know what I mean, towards everything right here in the box. But
Yeah.
then we're talking about bringing more manufacturing, which there's not a big focus on manufacturing. A lot of people that are in manufacturing are on their way retiring out, and so we're talking about 50 years later where there's no focus on the manufacturing realm of America, whereas other countries it is. That it's hard for me to see that all those directions somehow lining up to this, like, whoa, that worked. Like, look how America's blossoming now. We're taking back our power. It feels like it's gonna revert eventually. It feels like it'll start. There'll be a pinch. That pinch will get to the point where companies are possibly like gonna go under, and they're gonna go, okay, hold on, hold on.
Yeah.
Let's reopen the doors back over there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't think that this will stop people from manufacturing in different countries. As a matter of fact, I mean, think of it this way: like if say Apple decides to produce and manufacture, continue to produce and manufacture in China, or maybe they pick a different country, whatever. It doesn't really matter. But then they send their product to Europe, and the Europeans pay them in yuan, right, or whatever currency of that other country. That's money that's not being circulated here in the U.S. too, right? And I'm not saying that I mean, even if we have manufacturing here, so we do some iPhone, we don't manufacture parts here, but we do actually have in the Bay Area, there are
Oh yeah,
businesses where they have people who actually put them together here
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
then ship
Yes,
them out,
yeah, sure.
right? So we do have some of that, I guess, that part of the manufacturing process here. But I think, like, think of it as think of home building, for instance. Just one concept that has actually been a real big problem in 2008, we pushed a lot of our youth, and myself as included in there, to go to college, not to a like a trade school or
Yep,
something, right?
yep,
So you can go right now as an individual getting out of high school, go do an apprenticeship make like 50 grand a year at an apprenticeship to learn how to be work as a carpenter to build homes. And when you're out of your apprenticeship, you'd be making 100, 150 grand a year just working, trying to, swinging a hammer,
Yeah.
right? And the reason for that is there's not a lot of people who were trained in that. That's kind of shifting away. But what that's caused is home prices to go bonkers because we are really underbuilt in the US because of that situation.
Yeah.
So if we had more people trained in building houses, we'd be having more houses built and prices would come down because it's a supply and demand issue. Some of that can actually be translated, in my opinion, probably to products as well too. So having the ability to make more of those products, and if there's a supply and demand issue, which means that there would be a pricing power issue as well,
Yeah.
which may be beneficial for us too. And I'm just pontificating on that.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert as well,
Yeah.
but
I don't.
but
Yeah.
you know, so potentially there's that, right? That side of it.
I mean, I don't disagree. I do think that something that needs to kind of be, uh, built where it's sold is
Yeah.
definitely a little different because I think we could both agree that if there was a way to build whatever house you wanted in China and then have it placed exactly where you wanted it, and there was going to be barely microscopic differences, or not maybe not so microscopic, but there were going to be what you as the buyer might look at as insignificant differences between the house right next door
Hmm.
that was made there, but that one's 400,000 and the one you bought is 180,000. We would sell a ton more. You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So I'm saying
Absolutely.
there are certain areas where, like, I agree with you that you kind of have to deal with it the way that it is because it is constructed there, and you kind of need to build around that. You need to build the talent around that. You need to work on programs that allow for funding. You need to work on people's understanding of credit and credit maturity, so then people are able to buy homes. You need to have a lot of different things, programs to help people get homes. That works for the housing conversation, but when it is a product like a digital camera that can be made for either $40 or made for $240, and to be competitive, because we know not every company is going to bring all their stuff back. So if I'm going to be the only one, and now my camera is the only one that's 780, and for the same features, the rest of the market is at 375, it's like, you see what I'm saying? That's a lot
Yeah.
different than a home.
Yeah, that's true. I think, well, there's no doubt China can make things faster and cheaper, right? But I also think that's a function of competition. So when there's competition, there's an old economic theory called game theory, right? And game theory is all about how you are able to price things.
Yeah.
But as technology becomes more prevalent in any area, well, obviously technology is prevalent around the world. But when you have manufacturers out there in one significant, like you go to China and you go to a specific area in China, they're all creating computer chips and all of them are manufacturing these things. You have a ton of people doing it.
Yeah.
Then that allows product, number one, they become more efficiently produced and, you're producing a lot of them. So it's really what the market can bear in price. And if you
Right.
have a flood of that product, then the price is going to be lower. And I'm not saying that we can come over here and create a ton of competition and start, developing computer chips cheaper than China, at least right away. But, in 20, 25 years, if you have a lot of competition, it could really force some of those prices down as well too. So, I mean, I don't have all the answers to that, of course. Do I think it's beneficial what he's doing? Potentially,
Yeah.
right? Potentially it is. Is it beneficial for me and you in our lifetime? Maybe. Is it beneficial for our children's lifetime? Probably more beneficial, right?
Yeah.
For our children. And a diversification of what we do. I just do think that personally, this protectionist approach of bringing everything to America kind of takes us all away from that process we were on of a world economy opposed to just separate economies. And there's an effect to that and that could bring on unintended consequences like war. I mean, it starts off with It's like think about World War II, right? It's like it starts off with like sanctions, right? And then all of a sudden you're getting bombed in Pearl Harbor because we took too much oil away from Japan,
Right.
you know?
Right.
So, I mean, there's always unintended consequences, and who knows? Like he could start this situation and all of a sudden geopolitically things escalate. Because the thing is with tariffs, so that's not just that's not just an economic policy, that's also a geopolitical policy. You're
Hmm.
like basically saying like, hey, look, we're going to start doing all this on our own. I know your country's been making a lot of money on us, and China's in a pretty difficult economic stature right now. So they're saying, hey, look, like we're going to take, if we're going to take a haircut here, now all of a sudden, who's to say that doesn't escalate into something that's a little bit more, face to face, opposed to just like, adding sanctions and tariffs. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole lot to unwrap in it, um,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
It's
and
interesting. It's definitely layered.
yeah,
Uh,
and you bring up a lot of good points too. I mean, like, there's no way to actually tell how this will work itself out. There's no
right.
way to tell exactly how well it will work. Um, is it beneficial for us in the long run? I think it could be if it's done right. Is it going to be hurtful in the short run? Potentially, and how bad is that? It could be really majorly bad. Like, I think the one thing with Trump right now, though, is if we think about the tariffs, he's announced that he wants to do it, wanted to start, he started with 10% China, Canada, and Mexico, right? 25% Canada and Mexico for not all products, but pretty much quite a bit of products. But as you noticed, he said, okay, we'll hold them off for 30 days.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I think, okay, he's kind of coming from, there's an old theory for business owners where they're just like, what's chaos theory? Let's like cause as much chaos as possible so we can get a handle on things.
Huh.
And there's chaos theory, like just even for you and I as small business owners, where we're like, okay, let's basically burn everything to the ground and try to rebuild it up again. There's a lot of positive that happens in that, and that positive usually comes out. You're more efficient. You kind of change maybe your process and your vision and your direction change. You know what I mean? Like there's so many benefits to it.
Yeah.
Potentially he's doing that where he's like saying, okay, we're burning everything to the ground and trying to rebuild this thing. And right now, if we start tariffing Mexico and Canada, I mean, there was already an article or a white paper that I read that said if we really went through with 25% tariffs, that would actually subtract 8% of Mexico's GDP. It would fall by 8%, and Canada would fall negative 5%. So essentially,
Hmm.
Mexico would have a negative GDP, and so would Canada. So in this type of instance, you're thinking, okay, who has the power? Apparently we do, or at least with Canada and Mexico, and we can use that as a bargaining chip. So let's go ahead and put 25% tariffs. So we're going to announce it, scare everybody, and then say, okay, well, let's come to the table and figure out what we can do. Okay, Mexico, we want you to bring up your military and start working with us because we're paying for this right now in many different ways, and your guys' government is failing people. That's why they're coming here. So Canada is a little bit different story. I mean, we've always had a major trade imbalance with them, and we basically are funding the Canadian economy by a pretty significant amount. So he's saying, hey, look, that's why he was making those jokes. Maybe you guys should just become the 51st state. Like that's kind of a silly way to put it, but the
Right.
point is I think he's
Yeah.
just
They didn't take it like a joke.
right.
Let's
Yeah,
say
they
let's say
didn't.
it that way. They were. No
Yeah.
one took that in. They were pretty upset about that.
Yeah, so it's just like, in my mind, maybe he's just causing as much chaos as possible. I think he will end up introducing tariffs to some extent. I don't think it'll be as high as the 25% that he's come out with because he's like, hey, we want some concessions. You guys do these concessions, and then we'll drop it down
Got
significantly.
it.
I mean, so
Okay. All right, so I appreciate all that. So that was my apologies. I had some questions that definitely derailed us. Let's get back to the bookmark, which was taxing tips. So you were kind of there, and I think we're kind of exploring how some of these policies are trying to benefit the American people.
yeah. So I know there was a lot of talk on the campaign trail of getting rid of the IRS, which I know all of us would love. But but the reality is like, we still do have a lot of revenue come from that. But in his mind right now, he's thinking, hey, let's extend these tax cuts that I did in 2017. Let's stop taxing uh, overtime and tips. And overtime would be beneficial for like service. So for people that are paid hourly, right, and they do get overtime, that would be beneficial for them. They'd have more money for their families. But especially in like people in the police force. I mean, just I have a client who's a sheriff in our area, and he has to work overtime just to kind of make ends meet, him and his family. And overtime is taxed pretty heavily, so that would be beneficial for them. Just you have more money, more discretionary income, you spend more money, discretionary income.
I'm gonna be honest. I didn't even know people reported tips. Like most, I know
Yeah,
people that have that they work in restaurants or whatever, and they make tips. But I've never heard anybody talk about reporting those tips unless they were in a situation where they work in a restaurant where a lot of the tips end up getting put in with the bill and they're
yeah,
paid through the credit card.
yeah,
Then they get they get taxed, obviously. But that's why I've always heard people say, oh yeah, make sure you tip in
yeah,
cash because then it can go straight to your
yeah,
server or whatever. And
yeah.
so I didn't even realize when he first said it, I'm like, it just sounded like something for votes, to be honest. It sounded like, how do I find a way to talk to the regular person? You know what? There are a lot of servers in in America, a lot of restaurants. Let me speak to those people.
Yeah.
A lot of casinos, a lot of bars, and that's a whole flood of votes that I can potentially get, even though in reality it didn't seem like a huge deal, but it sounds like it's a bigger deal than I realized.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's Uber drivers and DoorDash, and there's a lot of tip
Mm,
industries out there. Like, and then think about it this way, man. Like, there's people like in different states where their minimum wage is not very high.
true.
And yeah, if they're a server in some states, their minimum wage is even lower, and then they live off their tips.
Right.
And yeah, you're right. I mean, I know a lot of people aren't putting those cash tips on there,
Right.
right?
Right.
And
At all.
if you're gonna go buy something that's of high dollar value that you need to show your income for, and you're not taking that extra $5,000 in tips that you're getting, maybe you're not going to get approved for that loan that you're trying to get, that type of stuff, right? Just because you needed 5,000 more. I don't know. I'm just throwing
Yeah.
it out there, but if they are able to put those tips all on there and not be taxed for it and use it for their advantage to take out loans or whatever they need to do with showing their W-2 and income, I mean that's beneficial for the entire economy over time
Absolutely.
at least.
Absolutely. I do see
And
it.
so I mean think about like you can go buy a house in I don't know, let's say like Mississippi, for instance, right? Like let's look at properties in Mississippi. I mean, I'm sure you can find a nice house out there for under 100,000 bucks still. I'm not, maybe it needs some work, but there's people out there who may not make a lot of money and they live off their tips that they, now all of a sudden they can put it on their W-2 or their 1040 at the end of the year, and now all of a sudden you're making a little bit more money, put you in that boat of getting an actual property.
Yeah.
So that's a benefit, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
when people buy houses, they buy bigger ticket items too: washers, dryers, dishwashers. They're hiring local contractors, so it's all kind of a perpetual thing. You
Yeah.
know. So that's a benefit. They're also talking about raising the SALT tax, so your state and local tax deductions, raising the cap on that, um, and then closing the carried interest loophole, which for you and I doesn't matter. These are more for like really really rich people, like billionaires and stuff. And
He always has to have his stuff for billionaires, boy.
Well,
Yeah.
he's actually closing the loophole on it, so actually making it harder for billionaires to use that as as a
Oh,
benefit for their taxes. So he took an example where he said, okay, at this what was it? Was it like the LA Lakers? I don't know. It was some sports team. He
uh-huh.
said, okay, there's a lady in here and she's hucking peanuts and her tax, she's in a 22% tax bracket essentially. She's a single lady, single female, making whatever amount. She's in the 22% tax. I think it was like 60,000 or something. Then
Okay.
you have like who else is on the court? LeBron, maybe it's the Lakers. LeBron James. LeBron James is getting, he's making 200 million a year, and his tax bracket is, whatever, 36%, right? Then you have the billionaire who owns this place, who's making all this money on it. He's actually only getting paid he's only getting taxed 11% on his entire income. And
Wow.
so he was like, oh, that's kind of frustrating. Like you have a billionaire out here making a ton of money, and all of a sudden he's only getting taxed 11%. It was like 11.6 or something. You could probably find the article where he was talking about
Yeah. Yeah.
it. But the point is he's saying like this doesn't make sense. I mean, can LeBron James stand to pay 36% of his income? Sure, of course. But can this lady making 54,000 stand to pay 22% of her income in income taxes? I mean, that's pretty tough. I mean, especially if you're trying to live. And so, can this billionaire stand to pay 25% or whatever his income is, 36%, right? And a lot of that is the carried interest loophole. So essentially, if you go buy a sports team, you have the say a county or a state says, hey, you move your stadium here, and you're going to pay for all this, but we're going to give you a ton of tax breaks for the team, and then as well too, you're going to be able to deduct the cost of this off of your your assets, and there's a lot of deductions that they get to take.
Mhm.
And so they're putting a lot of money out there, but they're also not being taxed even their fair share. So his whole point was, okay, well, we need to get rid of some of these
Okay.
deductions, and they're going to have to pay their fair share.
And so, what is this loophole called?
I think it's called the carried interest loophole, carried
All right.
interest deduction loophole.
I,
And
I
I'm
want
not an accountant, so maybe bring an accountant on to ask you to explain all this more
no,
for
no,
you.
all good. I'm not. I won't hold you to it that severely, but carried uh interest
Interest,
loophole.
yeah,
All right. I'm gonna keep a note of that for both of us, and because I'll be honest, to me, that sounds incredible, but it doesn't sound in alignment with some other things that he did in the first term. So I'm
yeah,
skeptical. I'm
oh yeah,
skeptical. I'm skeptical of that's one of those um, pushback against the narrative things. It
yeah,
sounds really
yeah,
good. You know what? And he's almost trying to connect. Now, if
yeah,
he is, all great. Like I love it. I think that's phenomenal to even view it, especially coming from the air that he breathes in the
yeah.
billionaire world. So to say like, look at us up here. This doesn't make sense for us. That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's awesome.
Well, hey, the one thing I would I find it hard to imagine that Trump can connect himself to the little man, like people like us, to the common person.
He did. He said the word groceries. You don't remember that?
Yeah,
Groceries. It's such a who uses this word? Who says things
yeah,
like this? Groceries.
yeah. But he's a billionaire. It's like there's got to be some displacement from reality.
Absolutely.
And but in his defense, it's like, okay, well, at least you're thinking about it. Those are types of things to think about,
Yeah, I think
and
that's phenomenal.
but I will say this. I think that one thing they're missing, and it's kind of interesting because, Elon Musk, I know people joke is like, Vice President Elon Musk, right? But, he made some major statements a few years back saying, hey, our birth rates are really low across the world, but here in the US as well.
Hmm.
And he, from me and my perspective, it's like, okay, you added all these, you're going to extend the 2017 tax cuts. There may even be some more tax benefits that he's adding in there, but these are the ones that I kind of wrote down here. And why don't you add more tax credits for children? You know, get more babies out there. I mean, think about it this way: if we go the way that we're going in the next 20 to 30 years, if less and less people are having children, how is that going to affect real estate? How is it going to affect the job market? How is it going to affect the services markets? Right? I
But
mean,
clearly,
you'll have
people don't care about that. I mean,
yeah.
the things that you just named were some of the main things that Kamala like campaigned on: housing,
Well,
and babies, and families, and tax credits for children, and people were like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, maybe they just didn't see the sincerity of it, right? So,
Possibly.
but
I think that's what I think that's what we deal with across the board, because I don't trust
yeah,
either one of them with, like, no matter what they're saying on both sides. I'm always like,
yeah,
you know what I'm
yeah.
saying? So I think that's an issue.
Sounds good, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's the issue across the board with politics. I did not believe that it was gonna definitely be drill, baby, drill.
Yeah.
I still don't think that it's gonna be as much as people think it's gonna be. I didn't
Yeah.
believe that the whole wall was gonna get built and that Mexico was gonna pay for it. I didn't believe that every every student loan was gonna be forgiven. I'm always kind of like, we'll see.
Yeah, it's like look over here, don't look over here type situation.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I agree, right? I mean, my grandpa used to have that saying. He's like, "Oh, only good politician's a dead one," you know. He'd say that all the time. But he'd be sitting on his chair, like, "Oh, listen to me, Jimmy. Only good politician's a dead one," you know. Call me Jimmy.
Hey, yeah, gotta call you Jimmy.
So, I mean, yeah, there's who knows how all this will shake out for sure. But I do think that, having tax cuts for the next generation of children is very beneficial,
That's
because there's
huge.
a lot of people out there right now that are making good income.
Yeah,
They're getting married or not, and they're saying, "Hey, look, I'm not going to have kids. What's the point of that? I'm rich. Like, what do I want to add some more stress to my life for?"
yeah,
Which I'm not saying children are stressful, but you and I both know.
yeah.
I mean, it's a different part of your life. It's a different season. It's not that it's stressful. It's just something new and you
Well,
enjoy
it
it.
depends
Well,
on your
most people do.
parenting. If you suck as a
It's
parent,
true.
it can be very stressful. You know,
Oh, for sure,
you don't
for sure.
create the proper foundation and building blocks. Your house can be a war zone. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's my whole point with this was like, look, if you want to bring all this offshoring back onshore and you're gonna, be a more protectionist country, then in 20 years, if our birth rates are low, what does it matter? We're gonna
yeah,
need more people to work. And I mean, think about Social Security, man. Like, Social Security right now is basically a Ponzi scheme. There's no money in the bank. It's the money that comes in goes directly out to the people, and it's because we've dipped into it over the years for certain things.
hmm,
But now all of a sudden, if our generation is having less children, then Social Security is not going to exist for us. And then we're like, okay, well, why were we even paying this? you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
I get
it,
that.
it's all give and take.
Focus on the next generation is always good. It's
That's
always good.
right.
As I hate watching. I forgot what event it is, but the when they're all I should know this. Still a little early for me. But when the Republicans and the Democrats are all in one room and they're like split half and half, and the whoever's addressing whatever president or whoever's doing the address says something about children, and like
Yeah.
one side stands up and the other
Yeah.
side, and you're sitting there like all he said was, kids are cute. Like can
Yeah.
everybody get up for this one thing? Can we just all agree? Can we all agree
Kids
that
are important.
right, that a healthy baby is better than an unhealthy baby? Like,
Yeah.
is that's an issue
Yeah.
as well? Okay.
I
Always
mean,
good.
and it's true though too. It's like whenever they do talk about children, though, they kind of just like talk about them as if they're like just a some type of economic benefit, right? Opposed to like really just being another human being that should be in the
Right,
world anyways. But
right, right. It's so
yeah, I
weird,
mean,
man. It's so
yeah,
weird. So weird. Politics
yeah,
can get very weird very fast. You know what I mean?
oh yeah,
It really can. And unfortunately, it consumes our world more than ever before. That's why I appreciate you being here to talk about, at least an element of it. We, of course, talked about a lot more, which we always do, in our conversations, whether they be short or long. You and I are always going to have a good conversation. And
yeah,
so, um, even exploring one specific piece of it, around the tariffs is good for us to really start, talking to each other and listening and hearing things out. You brought up some things today that I didn't know. I didn't realize um, had such a potential for a positive effect. Um,
Yeah.
and I agree with you because I kind of thought the same thing. At first, the narrative was like, oh yeah, New York Times said Trump blinked. Trump found out that they're not going to stand for it either.
Yeah.
Because that's how everything is. It's always political warfare. But I was thinking the same thing. Like, well, maybe this was all the idea. You know what I mean? Maybe this is, Jake Paul telling you that he's going to fight his brother. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like you haven't heard any promotion about Jake Paul since Mike Tyson. That was underwhelming for a lot of reasons. And then the next thing you hear is Jake is going to fight Logan. And you're like, okay, but it's so crazy that it makes
Yeah.
people go, really? And then, now you lean in again. And the
Yeah.
moment you lean in, you find out, oh, okay, they're not going to fight, but maybe I'll fight this person. We're at the table again. We're here. We're
Yeah.
interested. We're invested one more time. And so it comes across like maybe that's what the 25% tariff and the 50% tariff that he talked about during the campaign trail was just a measure to get people to the table. I'm hoping that was the idea overall, all along.
Or yeah, or else it's like, hey, let's Jake Paul's gonna fight whatever, whoever, right? And say Manny Pacquiao or something. The reality is they're just doing it for the money. Like it doesn't really matter who wins. I'm still gonna make like 30 million bucks, right?
Right, right. That's it. That's it.
You know.
That's what it comes down
So
to nowadays.
yeah, so hopefully it's not that, right?
Right.
But yeah.
So all in all, it sounds like you are saying that it is hard to tell right now if the tariff is going to be immediately beneficial or hurtful to the American people. But the idea is in the long run for America, we are going to begin to navigate back to um, onshore manufacturing, which is going to create more jobs, which is going to create a more robust, workforce, and which is going to strengthen us overall in not being so dependent on other countries for everything, and
Yeah.
basically be good for our stimulation. That's at least the hope and the direction and the reason for this. And it's not so much of what people were starting to feel like it was just some level of a political warfare or some level of a, what they used to call it, chicken. Was it chicken?
Yeah, game of chicken.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
a game of chicken. Like who's gonna jump first, basically,
Yeah.
and we're going to just feel the whole grunt of it. Like you said, it is a tax. So when the left was saying he's going to put a 25% tax and he's saying I'm not putting a 25% tax, he was, but he was just unable to, and this is often his issue, unable to articulate it in a way to allow people to understand that, okay, yeah, it might be a tax, but this is why. This is the
Well,
reason
yeah,
tax.
and there's more involved. It's not just the tariffs, right? It's like a 10-pronged approach that
Right,
he's
right,
going
right,
for. And I think the media kind of really focuses on the tariffs because that's probably the biggest news. But there's more that he's trying to do as well.
right.
So, I mean, yeah, I mean, you pretty much wrapped it up in a nutshell. I was going to mention one more thing, but it slipped my mind. So hopefully I can remember here towards the end. But
Please do.
um, yeah, so it's definitely more than just the tariffs, right? And it is a tax. It's just who pays for it. That's a much harder question to answer. You
Right.
know, is it beneficial in the long term? Possibly, potentially,
Right.
hopefully,
All
right?
right.
And on here, oh, I was going to say this. Oh, and some of this is national security involved because with some of the products we bring in from China, I mean, we've all heard the stories, right? Oh, there's something in the iPhone that can be triggered by some person in China. They can listen to you, right? But another big one is too is like just like the a lot of people are worried that our power grid will go down. For us to get those items has to come from China, and we're about 2 years out from getting some of those things, right? So some of it is definitely a part of that. I think I think a lot of it will be blamed on that, So, oh, well, this is a national security issue as well as, a personal issue. But reality is we have a ton of debt in the U.S. If we have too much debt and can't really start paying for that, our international investors will pull their money.
Hmm.
And we already have had people pulling them. China's been pulling their money out of our treasuries for a long time, and they're combating us with, away from using our currency, working with the BRICS nations, right? And that's a whole nother story. That's a political move, but also, that's a fighting stance. That's like a not an act of war, but it almost seems that way.
Hmm.
And you have countries pull their money out of our treasuries. We don't have enough money here as individuals to buy all those treasuries. So now all of a sudden you dump your treasuries, the world dollar is not dominant anymore. And then you have the US kind of in a precarious situation where we're no longer the dominant country in the world. And I'm not saying we're the best at it, but it's like my one of our pastors says. He says, "Look, like I know what a Christian's going to do with this money. I also know what somebody who's not a Christian is going to do with this money, and I'd much rather put my bet on somebody who's a Christian, right?" So it's like I'm not saying that there's no Christians in China and they're bad people and this and
Yeah,
that,
I get it.
but the point is like, who do you want to help run the world, right? Is it the U.S. or China?
Yeah.
So there's it's more than just one repercussion from just taking status quo, and that's where my point was saying is like actually what he's doing is something. And is it good or bad? It's going to be really hard to tell because there's so many moving parts, and we don't know what's going to happen in 4 years. We may go through another COVID type event, and then everything's just kind of back in the wind again, right? Like, I hope
Yeah.
not, but
Right.
that's the point.
And do you think that, not do you think, do you recall any efforts from any other administrations um, to help navigate us through this same problem? Or has everybody else just kind of been, hey, it is what it is. This is the way of the world. It's kind of the direction America's been going. Let's just stay the course. We're still powerful. Or has anybody else had their own efforts to say, hey, there's a problem over there. Let's see if we can redirect the ship?
Well, they've definitely done things more along the lines of like, okay, let's kind of make it in a way to save face, but let's not rock the boat too much.
Huh.
I mean, if you look at different presidents as they get in office versus the time they get out, I mean, you see how like just worn they are, right? I mean, unfortunately, Biden, like, man, poor guy, like, I mean, he did not look good coming out of office, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he didn't look phenomenal going in, but he didn't look that bad.
Right.
And Trump, like, just like he's like a duck in a pond, dude. Like anything comes at him, he's just like it rolls off his back. I mean, the guy looks exactly the same he did, when he took office in 2017. So So I think at the same time he's just not scared to kind of like ruffle feathers, which is a good thing. And we really haven't had a president like that um, in a long time. And we're kind of in the final moments where we need something like that. And again, like I said, love the guy or hate the guy. I don't really certainly care for him 100%, just like I'm sure many people don't. But there's definitely something that needed to happen.
Yeah, yeah. We don't agree with that. I think that's kind of, we all fall into, the personality of politics. You know what I mean? Because especially when, I'm going to say Obama really started it. Obama really was the first president that felt very transparent
Hmm.
and tried to make government transparent, and also had a certain charisma that people actually latched onto. You know what I mean? You kind of connected with him like you would your favorite comedian. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? There was a rhythm about him. There was a way about him that made you go, okay, okay, I can understand the way he put it. Or I can get on board with someone that thinks like that. And
Yeah.
then on came Trump, which felt like the same thing, just with opposite ideas. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It felt like another personality that for the people that attached to him, they could just connect. And oddly, because the people that connected with Obama, you can almost say like, well, yeah, that makes sense. But when Trump came out and Trump was like the billionaire that everyone knew as like the real estate mogul, and he was connecting with like the impoverished in Nebraska, I'm like, I wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Was the connection. But I'm saying all that to say that I think due to that, it forced that can be polarizing, right? When you have
Hmm.
such strong personalities. And so
Hmm.
for every person that fell in love with Obama, I'm pretty sure there was one that just he was distasteful to them. And
Hmm.
so then what happens is everything that person is about, you're just kind of against.
Yeah.
You don't really care if it's good or bad. You know, I've had
Yeah.
people tell me that I've had Republicans tell me they just wish Biden were dead. And I'm like, what did he do? He's never
Yeah.
done anything good. Everything he does against America. And I'll bring up like the CHIPS Act and I'll bring up this. And they're like, yeah, nah, better off dead. Like, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, they've
Yeah.
made up their minds. And so that happens a lot. You know what I mean? In today's political realm, it just feels like if we like the person, then cool. And I think Trump unfortunately fell into that villain role for a lot of people. Even the
Yeah.
people that love him, you know what I mean? I think they're like his good villain, you know what I'm saying? To the point where, you know what I mean? It's not like they're championing him like a hero, but I think it's more like the more of in a villain sense that like, yeah, he might be the bad guy to you, but he's here to destroy you all, kind of thing, right?
Yeah. I think people forget that he's a wonderful marketer.
And I say it all the time.
Wonderful
That's him. That's
marketer.
all he's been doing. I
Yeah.
mean, like I'm talking about before politics with his show, with the
Hmm.
WWE, with movies and being at Home Alone. Like he's always known how to keep himself right there.
Oh yeah, he would get influenced. Just he would write things for the Wall Street Journal. You know, to if he wanted to get certain things done in New York, he would write about them in the Wall Street Journal as kind of set his precedence
Smart.
before he goes after it. I mean, the guy is a wonderful marketer. So is he doing everything in our best interest? Can I be 100% honest? I don't know, but I do know this. He's a businessman. He owns lots of real estate. So the one thing I do know is he doesn't really want war. That's not good for his business. And some of the things that he's doing right now are actually going to be good for his business in the long run.
Right.
So if as long as his interests rely with how his businesses are running, they actually do help us and the small man
Hmm.
in many ways. Because if people spend more money, they have more potential to get into his places that he owns and spend more money with him. Which is not, I'm not, most of his places aren't geared towards billionaires going to them. He wants the general public. So if he can benefit us for that, then hey, all for it. If he
Yeah.
benefits the country as a whole in the long term, then that's even better.
Yeah.
Again, like he's a great marketer though. And people who get upset saying, "Oh, Trump's this, Trump's that." Some part of me thinks like, hey, like maybe he's just taking on this role, and that's really not how he is all the way. Maybe he's understanding like, okay, well, this is what these people want, and I'm going to try and do that for them. That's why I got elected. I mean, he's kind of doing a lot of the things that he was campaigning on, not all of them, but he's starting. That's a good sign. I'm not sure how this will all work out, but um, hey, I mean, it's only 3 more years, right? Or four, technically
That's,
still 4. It feels
I
like it's
know
been a year,
it
but
feels like a year. I get it. It hasn't
yeah,
even been a month, but it feels like a year has passed so far. But yeah, I agree. He is doing a lot of the things that he talked about. You know, some good that I do agree with, and I kind of can see the benefit. Some I'm as a humanitarian, I'm just not really for.
yeah,
Just personally, I do get the American way and things about America, but as we serve a higher power, and in that higher power, I'm not as much focused on the nationality of another human being, but more the fact that they are a human being. You know what I mean?
yeah, absolutely,
So
absolutely.
I think that's where my lines get crossed. But hey, I think this was good, man. I think we got another good one for the people. I'm gonna think of what next, to bring out. I did want to make sure that I let people know. It was The Pod is Good, episode 12. If you go back, check out episode 12, you will see
Hmm.
my man James and hear about his amazing story and be um, most likely inspired and but definitely captivated by his early beginnings. And then if you listen to episode 19, if you have any interest in being in the stock market, whether you're, entry level or you're already kind of moving along, he gave some incredible information and insight into some methods and some areas of focus that could benefit you greatly in the market. So, yeah, man, appreciate you. This is the third episode, another good one. Figure out what the fourth one's gonna be and get you back on soon, bro.
Yeah, sounds good. I know it's like we get kind of deep in these things. I think your other podcasts are probably more entertaining, but I'm glad to be here.
My goal is, like I say this, I want each episode to be the perfect episode for the person that is perfect for,
Mhm.
right? Because
Yeah.
if I have my guy Master Sheldon on and we're talking about kung fu the whole time, hey, maybe somebody could care less about kung fu. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? Maybe they heard another episode where I was talking to you, and they
Hmm.
want to hear somebody else's another person's life story because they
Yeah.
heard episode 12, and they turn on episode with Master Sheldon, and they're like, "This isn't what I want." But there's somebody that loves martial arts that will be enthralled to listen to him talk about the true origins of martial arts and them coming from
Yeah.
Africa and how they got moved to Brazil and then China and Japan. Like they would love that. So it's like
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, and I wish I did better in kind of giving people a even kill throughout the show. They could just sit back and binge and get kind of a similar vibe the whole time. But hey, so is life.
Nah.
That's why I say it's a podcast about humans for humans. And one thing about humans is we all over the place. We have varied interests. We're diverse. We have even with one person. One night you're celebrating because your Eagles won the Super Bowl, and the next day you're in the hospital because you got bad news about a family member. Like
Yeah.
our lives are all over the place. So I try to keep the show the same way.
Right on, man. No, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
All right, my guy. Next time, bro, I'll holler at you. Blessings to the family. Can't wait to meet the new princess.
Yeah.
And
Sounds good. No, I appreciate it.
and
Yours too.
thank you, man. Thank you. Yeah, we're gonna come and see you. We'll have to go you know, camping or go out in the water or something sometime soon.
Yeah, man.
You
Sounds
you owe
good.
me you owe me a fishing trip.
I do. Sounds good, man.
All right, bro.
All the time.
And all the time.
Pot is good.
All right, bro. Talk to you soon, bro.
All right, have a good one.